Hello, 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 and welcome all to this Power to Fly Chat and Learn. My pronouns are he, they, and my name is Hunter. Did that in reverse today. Woo, keep it fresh and spicy. Hope y'all are doing great. We're so happy to have you here. A little bit of housekeeping before we jump in. You get to participate in this. This is the Chat and Learn, where you get to chat with us and we will learn things together. So please feel free to write in the chat and you can turn your cameras on. It's a great way to connect with our speaker when asking questions. We are recording this, so we'll be sending a rewatch link in the next few days, and you'll see it posted on our YouTube channel as well. And yes, please do write in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from. How's your day going? How's your week going? How's your season going, depending on where you are in the world right now? We'd love to hear. So without further ado, we have our family favorite, Rachel Serwetz here. Rachel Serwetz, early professional experience was a Goldman Sachs in operations and Bridgewater Associates in HR. From there, she was trained as a coach at NYU and became a certified coach through the International Coach Foundation. She worked in HR research at Aon Hewitt and attained her technology MBA at NYU Stern. Throughout her career, she has helped hundreds of professionals, I would say maybe thousands at this point, thanks to partnering with us, with career exploration. And for the past 5 years, she's been building her company, Woken. Go check them out, which is an online career exploration platform to coach professionals through the process of clarifying their ideal job and career path. And boy, are we lucky to have her today. And she's going to talk a bit about that. So please welcome Rachel. Good to see you. Hello.
Awesome. Hello, hello. Let me get my screen going so I can properly share and we can dive in. Let me know if you can see the slides. Yes. Okay, wonderful. And what I'm going to also do is pull up the chat so that I can see anyone and everyone in the chat, which is wonderful. Okay, great. So today we are going to be diving in to talk about career pivots, but of course, by the end, we will have time for Q&A. So if I don't get to something career-wise that you need to know, please let us know. But I'm going to start with about 10, 15, 20 minutes of slides. I like to just give you guys some guidance and frameworks that will get the wheels turning, and then we can dive into the questions from there. And please feel free to use the chat. I will absolutely pay attention in case there's any good questions that arise. All right. So we already went through my background. I'm going to skip over that. And I'll just breeze through the agenda, but really I want to help you get set up thinking about what does a career pivot really mean, how to clarify the path that you really want moving forward, what's feasible, how do you make that pivot happen, and then we'll go from there. So the first thing that I see people sort of dealing with or struggling with or questioning is like, I don't know what I want, right? And sometimes we're just on the fence about like, I think I want this change, I'm not sure, and I feel this in between. So, really, the first thing is recognizing to meet yourself where you're at and, recognize that you have that level of interest, but maybe if you're not fully certain yet, how do you get yourself to that point of readiness first and foremost? So first of all, how long have you been considering a change, right? How engaged do you feel with the current career path or professional path that you've been on? Sometimes we get stuck because we know we want to change, but we don't know what that change should be. We don't know maybe what our direction should be. And so sometimes we feel stuck if we're not sure of what's next. But, there's a difference between I'm ready and want and know that I need a change, but what that change could be is a second question. So you want to separate those two things. And you want to ask yourself, what do I need out of my career? Am I getting what I want, what I deserve? And where are things maybe lacking? What are the opportunities from what I've experienced and what I want more of or less of? And where am I really, what exactly am I craving to change exactly? And is there anything holding you back? It's very common to have any number of limitations, hesitations, limiting beliefs, you name it. It is normal that our mind will just, play tricks on us, and our mind becomes this very strong story and narrative, and it takes over. So what is it in particular that hesitation may be, if anything? You know, and by the way, these hesitations may be good clues for questions where you need to seek out more information or research. So really listening to, what are you not sure about? Where are you feeling unsure, and why? And where is that feeling coming from? You don't want a lack of confidence to drive the decisions. You want information to drive decisions. So recognizing, what are you not sure about, and how do we make sure to understand those hesitations fully, so that the right mindset is driving your actions and your decisions and your outcomes. And then you want to think about the flip side, which is, what would it look like if I were to do this in the ideal way? Like, if I'm feeling nervous, what would it look like if I was feeling ready or open-minded or brave, right? And so, look, we don't want you to, there's this happy medium of feeling that discomfort that's healthy, right? We don't want you to do something that you're not ready for, or you're not capable of, or something that wouldn't be right for you. But, sometimes we do have to embrace something a little new and different. What would that be for you, right? And just trying to step into that new space, or that new confidence, right? And what do you need to gain in terms of your mindset to step into that new path, right? And this is kind of just like a fun little piece here, where sometimes when people are debating a pivot, you do want to separate, like, is my job search just not working, or is it actually the path I'm pursuing, right? Because it's possible that you're pursuing the right path, but maybe I just need better job search methodologies or job search practices. Am I networking? How am I actually going about my search? Or is it actually the role in the industry, and I do really want to be doing something different? I want to train for something different. I want to make a pivot. So that's just another consideration to keep in your mind, right? So getting comfortable, right? So first you want to picture change, right? Like, I think some people get so worried and almost take themselves out of the running because they assume it might be too much of a change, right? Too big of a change. And so you want to just jot down on a piece of paper, what am I worried about? Is it the fact that I might have to move locations, or commute, or travel, or work remote, or, how would I deal with, the salary change, or any number of things? So jot down the actual implications for your life that you are not sure about or may be impacted. And then you can look into those things and see, how can I gather information to see what this may mean, versus sometimes it's just this lingering feeling, right? We want to make it real and get that information of, what would it really mean for my life? Learning is the key. I always talk about this, but I'm such a big believer, and I have a whole process around career exploration where you can do research, you can do networking with professionals, you can learn, you can get every question answered before you decide to make that pivot. So remember, learn, explore, reflect, research, network, get those questions answered. That's what's going to help you figure out, am I comfortable? Am I ready? What does this path look like? Is it the path for me? In a nutshell, if that's one thing I can drive home, I will. And support. This is interesting. I even personally was encountering big career changes, and I remember feeling like pressure from my family. This could be subconscious. You might have an unspoken sort of feeling, but your loved ones around you are important to you, whether you want to believe it or not. So where do you need support, right? Is there some conversation you need to have with a loved one? What would it look like to get ready and get support to explore and embrace, and maybe even just consider some of your next steps? Benefits, right? So career adjustments can actually be a good thing. Sometimes when you're going after the same exact role, sometimes you need to freshen up, add a new edge, add a new angle. Maybe you don't need to do a 180, but it's like, how can I make it easier to actually pursue my next step and sort of leverage my experience, but add a little flavor of excitement, add something new to the mix, add a new skill, maybe a new industry, something that, still feels relevant and feasible for you, but how does it make it, a more interesting and a more efficient perhaps path forward? Is there something more fitting or more interesting for you that actually makes your job search easier, right? It creates opportunity, right? So when you really enjoy what you're doing, studies show that you earn more money and you earn more money faster. So you want to think about, what have I experienced? Maybe there's a similar role, new industry. Maybe there's a different size organization. Maybe there's a pivot in role within the same industry. There's so many sort of combinations of how you can find a little bit of a change that, doesn't have to be the craziest change, but it actually can help you perhaps to find new doors and open those windows, right? And actually it allows you to think about, maybe I want to have impact, but in a different capacity, right? Maybe I really care about the world of education, but do I need to be a teacher or whatever it may be? So the mission and the purpose and the causes that you care about, are there different ways or spaces to be a part of that, right? And of course it makes you feel better when you're embracing a professional path. I think it has such a benefit on the job search, but also your life personally, when you're embracing things that you actually can get behind and get excited about. So a lot of benefits to being open to that change. And being iterative. I like to see your career as an informed experiment, right? So what went well, what didn't go well? What can I optimize on in my next step? What can I do more of or less of? How can I learn from past experiences and get into an even better next step moving forward? So here's a great 3-part framework that you can use to either reflect on past experiences or even clarify your experience going forward in terms of what direction would be a great fit for you. So the first thing I like to call out is the function. So this is really the day-to-day of your role, the projects, the skills, the activities, those sort of actions of like, where is your time going in a given week? And then there's the content, right? So there's 2 different things here. If you're a data analyst, or if you're, a salesperson, or if you're a consultant, or whatever the act of what you're doing, where the nature of what you apply that to can be totally different. And essentially the way that this gets translated is role and industry. So remember to separate those 2 things. And of course, there's the work environment, the size of the organization, the people, the pace, the travel, the hours, the culture, all of that. So this 3-part framework can be really good to come back to. If you're ever like, where am I? What do I need? How do I clarify things? Always feel free to come back to this. It's a great way to just make sense of things and sort of how you feel, what you need, what's going well, what's not going well in terms of this 3-part framework. Ideally, you can clarify, what do I really want and what's a fit for me in each of these 3 buckets. That would be great, right? And then when you go to interview, so much easier to explain what you want and also assess, is this the right role for me? Because you already know what makes sense for you. So doing that behind the scenes work is really going to help you going forward. Career exploration, just to define it, it's sort of what I've been describing here, but know that there is steps that you can take and a phase that you can be in to simply learn and reflect and compare and contrast and clarify what's next for me before you job search. In a nutshell, that is what career exploration is. I like to educate and define this just so you know that it's okay to be in a moment of researching before you apply to anything at all. Why is it so impactful and important? It's going to make your job search more efficient. It's going to make your interview so much more compelling, and it's going to increase the odds that you actually are fulfilled in a path that makes sense for you, and that longevity and sustainability of the professional path that you're choosing. So this is kind of what career exploration looks like. I'll just sort of walk you through the process here. So first, you want to just say, am I ready to do exploration? Get motivated, get accountable. Then you want to reflect, and actually you're going to reflect along these 3 lines. And you're going to ask yourself some questions to understand, what am I natural at? What am I good at in terms of the day-to-day? What are my affinities and propensities? And then the content is kind of like, what problems do I care about? What causes, what missions as part of the broader industry or broader company mission of what are we working towards? So you're really going to try to reflect on each of these 3 buckets. And then you're going to say, what roles and industries are relevant, viable options given my reflections and given what I'm like. Then you, of course, can do a little bit of online research, but most importantly, networking with professionals who are in those roles and in those industries. And there's a lot we could talk about in terms of how to network really well and properly, but that's really the key to learning accurately, what are these roles and industries really like? And then I show you this as a little circle because there's reflection and there's sort of pivoting. You may talk to someone and it may not be the fit, based on their role, but maybe there's a team next to them that you want to learn about. There's always a next step to each of those conversations. And when you go through the rhythm of researching, networking, and reflecting, that's what gets you to the point of saying, okay, I actually feel certain. I actually feel informed. I actually feel confident about what path is next and what path is right for me. That's when you can decide on the upskilling or skill development opportunities and programs and boot camps and certifications and all that kind of stuff. And of course, that's when you can do your branding, your resume, all that. And of course, your job search. So this would be the ideal flow. Depending on your timeline, sometimes we have to just job search quickly. And that sometimes is the case just based on your needs. And that's okay too. But this is sort of just a picture of what exploration could look like if you were to pursue that process. If you're figuring out if you're a fit for a certain role, right? You need to first understand who you are. We've talked about that, the self-reflection. And then you need to understand, what are they looking for? Accurately, do I understand? Have I spoken to 5 people who do this role? And do I understand the patterns of what this role typically looks like at different organizations? Do I understand the day-to-day, the projects, the skills? You really want to paint a picture as if you were to walk into that job tomorrow. So if you're debating a pivot, if you're debating a new role that's different, this is kind of the 2-part framework: understanding yourself, your affinities, your skills, your propensities, and deeply understanding the role. That's when you can say, okay, are there gaps? Where is there a fit? Where do I need to upskill? All that kind of stuff. And you want to look at, transferable skills. Sometimes you've done that thing in a different way or a similar way, right? So you sort of can, look at the requirements on a job listing and actually just give yourself a little bit of notes next to each of those requirements. Have I done this before? How well am I familiar with it? Am I an expert, or am I just, exposed to it? Is it something I could be great at, would be great at, want to get great at? You can really sort of, make sense of that job description. And you want to try to be as objective as you can. This is where it gets hard, because sometimes we have imposter syndrome and we maybe feel that, lower confidence, but you want to look at the job description and try to wrestle with it in a way that, how can it relate to your past experience? How can it relate to you in the future? How can you get there? So making sense of what you're reading. And even if you don't meet 100%, that's okay. Now, upskilling, right? So if you're trying to pivot, can you take something on, whether it's a self-driven project, maybe it's an internship, a fellowship, an apprenticeship, shadowing, pro bono work, contract work, or could it be a formal learning through some sort of program, boot camp, certification? There's so many ways to learn, but it has so many benefits to upskill, right? You can add this to your materials and add it to your resume and your LinkedIn and show them that you're truly committed and invested in that path. It gives you something to talk about during your interviews, and it makes you more confident when you decide, I want to go get involved with that. I want to go pursue that type of training opportunity. It gives you the reminder that you have the choice to decide what you want to go get involved with. It begs the question, what do I want to go learn? But it also, it gives you that positivity of like, I feel my sense of value, especially if you're not working. To have a project going on, it just reminds you, I can be creative. I have these skills, right? When you're fully searching, it's a lot to be in that sort of like, I need help mode all day, every day. So what are you learning? What are you gaining? What value are you developing in yourself, right? So there's things you can learn, and there's things you can give, and there's things you can ask for, but you don't want to constantly be in that asking mode. You want to be in like, I'm also building up myself. I'm also investing. I also have skills to offer, and not forget about that, right? So determining your skill gaps, considering what format of learning would be the best for you, and then of course, looking into your options carefully. There's so many different ways to learn. So really being thoughtful about upskilling options. And you can always do more in the future, but just take a moment to compare, especially if something's going to take you time and money. Branding yourself for the pivot. So we'll talk about this super quickly, and then I'm open all ears for Q&A. So professional summary is something that I love. When you can concisely document your background, your strengths, and your direction, it's a 3-sentence framework that I love for the resume, for the LinkedIn About section. And guess what? It's also the Tell Me About Yourself framework. This is a beautiful way to craft who are you in a way that you can make sense of it for someone else, but you can really hone and craft it in a way that it makes sense given the direction you want to go in? How can you tie your background to the direction that you want to go in? How do you create that bridge? How do you own the story? You can make sense of it for someone else and actually do this homework in your own time so that you're not caught off guard when you have to chat with someone, or if you're sending them your materials. Again, these are things you can spend a little bit of time on to make the story make sense. Of course, with resumes, the functional resume is an interesting option if you're pivoting. I think I had, I'm trying to think that there was one example of someone who had been in the world of education and then she was moving into sort of a different corporate area. And she was highlighting, she had experience with onboarding or admissions or client management or project management. This was somebody coming from the world of higher education. So, you can make it not as obvious if you don't make it chronologically, like, here are the jobs I've done. What about here are the buckets of skills? Now, of course, you still want to keep it realistic of like specific tasks, specific projects, outcomes, results, metrics, all of that. And you're still going to list the organizations you worked for. But functional resumes are an interesting option if you're pivoting. LinkedIn, of course, optimize for keywords, your headline right below your name, your about section, your previous role titles. As long as you're being accurate with what you did, is there a way of highlighting in the role title field, as well as the description, what were the key skills that you've done in your past that are relevant to what you want to be doing going forward? Video pitch, we have the technology at our disposal. Anyone could go on, recording a 1-minute video, put it on YouTube for free. You can even put it on unlisted. It doesn't have to be public, but having a video that's accessible to you that you can even add to a resume, add to a LinkedIn, add to an email, networking email, or whatever it may be. How do you introduce yourself? How do you use technology to stand out? And thought leadership, right? So, blogs or videos, this should say produce, not product, producing thought leadership. So imagine you want to pivot. Can you write a blog about the topic of what you're trying to move into? Show that you are an expert, or use writing as an exercise to learn what you need to learn. And you can send those things after an interview. So producing thought leadership is great. And of course, upskilling programs and adding that to your materials and adding that to your branding as well. The key with pivoting is really learning the nuances of how have people done this before, and networking to really understand, do I need to start in role A before I move to role B? What are the realistic pathways and how do I pursue this? Is it a 2 or 3 step process? What could be the strategies of how to break in? Sometimes we do same role, different industries. Sometimes we say, I want to really pivot role, even if I stay in the same industry, right? It depends on your priorities, but is there a strategy and an approach that you can prioritize based on what kind of change you're really seeking? So learning from professionals is absolutely the key. And, of course, we already mentioned, this is what I do, and I'll make sure you guys have all my information. But, in a nutshell, I guide professionals through all of these different processes and make sure that you have all of the support you need. I'll make sure you guys have our links. And I would love to take some Q&A at this point.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel, for that. And you can see Rachel also dropped in the I Am Woken website at iamwoken.com. Check it out. Lots and lots of great resources there. Rachel, there's so much in that is so awesome and helpful. So friends, now is the time for the rest of the session where you can drop in your questions in the chat, and we will go through them and answer those questions. We also got a list of pre-submitted questions from y'all. So we put that into a doc here. They've been anonymized, so we don't know who wrote them. So if you hear your question, you can do a little shout out in the chat if you want, or a follow-up if you like. And let us know what's resonating with you, even if you have any just thoughts of what came up for you in your own personal journey through Rachel's talk there. We would love to hear it, because it would be a great springboard, and I'm sure it would be helpful to someone else to hear as well. So Rachel, I love that you talked about in early on when you were talking about people going through this transition and they're feeling this like in between, and and you suggested, meeting yourself where you're at. So in that spirit, someone asked, how do you determine when a career move is feasible or not? Like you said, sometimes we're just going. We need it because we need the money, or sometimes we need, we're just burnt out on what we're currently doing and are interested in changing? How do we make those decisions?
Yeah. In terms of feasibility, like the first thing you want to ask yourself is your personal timeline. So, like you said, the financials come first. We have to take care of ourselves, and that's okay. Job search statistically takes about 3 to 4 months, and that's if you're looking for similar roles to your past. And so, if you have a little time on your side, can you afford a little extra time to upskill and make a pivot happen? Sometimes I've seen people say, you know what, I want to do a part-time job just to give myself some security to afford the time to upskill and afford the time to pivot, right? So there's creative ways to go about it. But if you need something quickly, obviously the quickest way of doing it is similar role, that you've had before. But as I sort of mentioned earlier, you can also ask yourself, maybe I need to move quickly, but maybe there's still a small way I can optimize. Can I find a similar role in a different industry or a different organization or a different, culture, work environment, size of organization, any other areas of improvement that still, put you a step forward, or even sometimes there's like smaller pivots, right? So maybe instead of the exact same role, is there like a 10-degree pivot that it's like sort of like the sister role, right? It's adjacent, it's similar, but at least it's a step in the right direction, right? So there's different, smaller opportunities. And even if you have to pursue a role just for now for that security, pivots, you can do things on the side of your job. You can do that upskilling. You can look at internal mobility once you land a job and you're at that new organization. What other projects or teams can you get involved with? So sometimes pivots can be something that you pursue, incrementally, periodically. What are the stages or the phases? It just depends on what's important to you, the prioritization, how dire is the need or the change. Some people say, you know what, I cannot have this role again, right? It just really depends on how you're feeling, your timeline. And also when you say feasibility, I mean, certain pivots may be easier than others, right? You may say, you know what, role A and role B are actually more similar, than they are different. And so maybe making that pivot, it really depends on the nature, right? I had a teacher who became a project manager, right? She did pursue the project management PMP certification and she took a little time to do that. So, how 180, how big is the change and how much do I need to do realistically based on how people pursue these roles and how people get hired into these roles? What does it look like, right? How much upskilling do I need? Do I need a boot camp? Does it take me a year to learn how to be a data scientist? Or does it just take me 3 months because I have a lot of transferable skills? So it depends on you, your background, your transferable skills, where you're looking to go, how far of a change is it, and really learning the reality of how do people pursue this role? Who gets hired? What do they look for? What makes sense for me, right? There's so many ways to think about it. This is why it's good to like chat with, whether it's a coach, a mentor, a peer, and just say, here's my situation. And then like, how do we customize the plan, based on you, right?
Totally. And I love that you mentioned just now and before too, of like talking to these different people. And I love when you ask the question, like, have I talked to 5 different people in this industry? I thought that was just a really great, simple metric that like really stuck out for me, and be like, oh, do I really understand this job? Or do I just understand like the surface of this job? Do I really want to spend every single day sitting at the computer doing X, Y, and Z? Or actually, is it something else?
Yes. Yes. Learning, like I cannot say enough, but like when you networking with professionals is so important. Knowing how to do it properly. I think that's another challenge. Like sometimes people want to go network and they set up those calls, but then they walk away saying, I didn't get what I needed. So it's good to say the 5 people, but also really get concrete, get creative, get comprehensive, get specific with how you even phrase your questions. You don't have to prepare such that you're an expert going in. The calls are meant to learn, but you do want to think about what can I actually ask such that in these 20, 30 minutes, I walk away truly more informed. I get examples, I get data points, I understand projects and trends, not just understanding that person's path, but who are the 3 new hires on your team and what were the patterns across them? Or like, what have you looked for? Who was your latest new hire? Or, I actually on my website, I have a whole list of about 50 creative networking questions. So you just want to make sure you're definitely learning and you deeply understand these paths and the reality of them. But make sure you know kind of how to do that well. You don't want to network for the sake of it. You really want to be aware of like, what is my goal with networking? Am I getting out of it what I need? I always say paint a picture so clearly as if you were to walk in and do that job tomorrow. That's how you want to feel in terms of your level of information, because I see it all the time. It's sort of this process that sort of spirals naturally, because when you have a chat with someone, it usually leads you to some next step. You think you want to chat with this one person, but really there's always like something else going on that's a little different. And when you're honest with them about like, here's what I'm all about, here's what I like, here's what I'm good at, and you leverage their exposure and their perspective, it's a beautiful thing that they usually can suggest, oh, go look into this, that, and that, right? And then it becomes like a journey. When you naturally follow that, it does lead you to the outcome of saying, okay, I've done my due diligence, I've done my homework, I've done my research, and it led me here, probably to a place you couldn't have predicted in the beginning of that journey. But allow yourself to go deeply into the exploration. It will pay off, right? I just think the learning, and then you walk into those interviews and imagine having to spoken to all those people, and you can walk in being like, I actually understand this deeply. You'd be surprised, like even if you don't have the experience, your ability to speak to what you would do and what are the factors on your mind and how would you approach this and what's important and what would you measure and how would you do it and what are the resources and all this stuff. If you can approach it really knowledgeable and confident and excited, I mean, that goes a long way in an interview, right? A lot of people show up to interviews just like, I'm going to say the thing I think they want to hear, versus like, I'm actually really informed and I'm actually aligned with this role. And here's why. And here's all the, homework I did to even prove that to myself, let alone prove it to you.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is authentic confidence is key, because there can be a facade of confidence where we're like, yeah, I got this, but we don't know anything about the job really. But then if we've done our homework, we've done our research, we've talked to all these different people, we're informed, and that brings this authenticity to that level of confidence, would you say?
Oh yeah. I mean, an interviewer wants the interviewer needs to walk away confident. The only way that they can know that they got to know you is if you're being yourself. And I think it's tough because interviews, we want to put on our best self, and it's important to practice and communicate clearly and prepare. But sometimes that leads someone to either just using some extra jargon, or maybe they're not telling stories clearly. And you want to find this balance of like, I'm prepared and I'm clear, but I'm really being specific and authentic, like you said. And when you do that upfront homework of, I'm figuring out what these roles are and I'm figuring out what I want, it makes it so much easier to infiltrate the key information when the interview arises and bring up what you should highlight. And it does make it easier to be compelling and to have a story that makes sense. I always say career exploration is like, you're basically asking the interview questions to yourself before anyone else asks it to you. Because if you don't believe the answer, right? Like, I think sometimes we prepare for interviews and we're like coming up with an answer because we have to, versus, but what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Why am I a fit for this role? What if you only had to answer to yourself? It's kind of like, now I can be honest. Maybe I'm not a fit for that role. Like, why am I even going after it in the first place? Sometimes job search, there's this scope creep where we just start applying to things and like, we're just not even sure what makes sense anymore. So like, take a step back and like, pretend you're sort of interviewing yourself in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. It makes me think, I'm reading this book right now. It's actually about writing, but I find it very helpful in this context too, of like how we tell our story. It's called Bird by Bird by Annie Lamott. And this book that came out in the 90s. It's really great. And she was talking about writer's block. And she mentions, sometimes I just sit and I write a letter to my grandchild so that I have no inhibition about the story that I'm telling. And then I convert it into like a short story or something. And it makes me think of what you're talking about, like telling these stories to ourselves without these inhibitions so that we're really confident, we really believe the story. So then when we go into the meeting, we're like actually telling an authentic story that rings true and lands and makes sense. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Isn't it
that's
great?
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Check out the book. I think you'd love it. Okay. We're getting great, lots and lots of questions in the chat, which is awesome. So there was a lot of, I love the chat is like really a flurry about the functional resume topic. So So I really love the functional resume ideas, that's like it keeps it dynamic, it keeps it interesting. I'm going to summarize a few questions that have been coming in. Some people have found that some recruiters find them confusing or they don't really understand them, or they think that maybe they've been told that, oh, I should just have like a chronological version instead. And some people made some
Yeah.
suggestions in the chat about that as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Like, look, chronological is absolutely the traditional. And I think starting simple with a resume is majority of what makes sense. I think with there's ATS systems and there's recruiters and people take 6 seconds to look at the resume, keeping things simple is absolutely like usually a common good best practice. Functional is just something creative you might consider trying if you've maybe been searching for a while, or you want to pivot, and maybe you've told your situation to someone and they maybe agree that functional would be good for you to try. Obviously there's pros and cons and things like that, but I think, as long as I think you can get creative with functional. So there's actually a few things. Number one, if you did it purely functional with like, here's the categories of my skills, I still think in parentheses, you can say which organization or which date, you're still being really specific with the tasks and the projects and the outcomes and the results. You're just bucketing it. The other way to actually do functional that I've done before is you do it chronologically, but you know how like you have org name, role title, and then you have like 6 bullets about what you did. Within those 6 bullets, you can say, okay, these two, like project management, and here are the 2 bullets about that. And then here was client management, and here are the 2 bullets about that. And this was financial budget management, and here are the 2 bullets about that. So you can actually embed the functional categorization within chronological. That's one way of doing it. I think you can do either, like purely functional and still stay specific enough that people can rely on it, or do chronological but embed some of the benefits of categorizing your skills. So it's one idea of many, and job search is such a balance of like, what are the best practices, what have I been doing, what's working and what's not. And it's one of many ideas that you can try if you feel like I've literally done everything else. That being said, do I think resume is your number one tool? No, I think networking is. But is the resume a component of this whole thing? Of course it is, right? So you just want to consider like, what are the little, levers that I have? And when is the right time for me to try something a little new and different, depending on what have I tried? Has it worked? Have I gotten feedback? Why do I think this next type of resume would make sense for me? Like, obviously put some logic to it, but it's one idea of many. And I think the main point is, even if you embed the functional within a chronological, you just want to make sure your transferable skills pop if they are there, right? If you have those experiences, you think about chronological without the functional skill categorization, you're just looking at the bullets. So when you categorize it, you're just making it easy for somebody to say, okay, my role was broken up into 3 parts. Here are the 3 parts, right? And you're giving it a name, and it just helps somebody make sense of your background more easily.
Totally. That phrase of help me help you, right? Just keep it simple. Let it just like, it's right there. There's the bulletin points. Our eyes are naturally drawn to like bullet points and indentations and script and stuff and text to break it up. Just like, they're going through, if it's a recruiter, they're going through a lot of these, and it's just way to make it pop. I love what you said there. And keeping it simple, so important. So we've talked about networking. You've mentioned networking quite a bit. It's so important. Like you just said, it's like the number one tool. And someone asked if if they should network with a recruiter on LinkedIn before applying. What do you think about that? Is that appropriate? Should they ask questions? Should they do it after? Not at all?
I think the only reason to try to network before you apply somewhere is if you think you know someone and can get like a actual referral. Like sometimes companies have an internal system where they actually have to send you their specific unique referral link, or they have to put your name somewhere and send you some link or whatever it may be before you formally apply online. And then that employee might be rewarded and incentivized to try to get you hired. And so that would be the reason to try to network first if you feel like you can have a warm introduction, a connection, someone you know, something like that. Other than that, I personally think you can apply and then absolutely try to network. Do you know anyone that works there? Do you know someone that might know someone that works there? Do you have anyone in your alumni network that works there? If you don't already know how to search your alumni network on LinkedIn, please go find how to do that. It's a great pool of people. And then the last resort would be cold outreach, either to the recruiter or someone who's on that team that you want to join. So absolutely trying to network with at least one human being after you apply is always a good rule of thumb. The warmer the connection, the better. If you can manage an intro or something like that. But if not, yes, you absolutely can message someone to try to stand out. And I like to just focus that message on learning. You still want to set up an informational call. You want to learn from them. You want to ask them questions. You want to introduce yourself. Maybe you put a brief blurb about you and why you're a fit. You want to balance, doesn't have to be too long, but it should be a meaningful, specific, thoughtful note that hopefully catches their attention. So get some help if you want to sort of draft that. But networking for every job application, is, I would say, critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a related note, for the networking, some folks were asking also, several people plus one, this question about getting past the bots for that first screen of resumes. And a lot of resumes aren't read by human eyes in that first screen. Would you say networking is that way in?
Yes. I mean, statistically, networking is the way that people land jobs. I'm going to pull up this stat that I saw. I took a screenshot of it on LinkedIn, and this was statistics from the Wharton School. 80% of jobs are not publicly advertised. 75% of jobs are secured through your network, and you're 10x more likely to be hired through a referral. So, I've seen those statistics in so many different places, but yes, the short answer is don't only rely on the job search engines and the job boards. I know this is frustrating and I know it's counterintuitive and I know it's weird because you're like, job search. Okay, there's job applications. Logically, that makes sense. The industry, the system is a little broken and you got to look at what works and do that. Just because there's a tool at your disposal with open job postings online doesn't necessarily mean it should be the number one thing taking up the most of your time. So I know it's where your gut tends to go of here's what I should be doing. But just remember, people are here, career coaches and peers and mentors and people around you to teach you and mentor you and provide you guidance with how should I be spending my time and what are the ways to network. This is one example. This call is one example of that. So try to learn how to job search. And yes, the quick answer is networking is absolutely, I usually say 50%, however much time in a week you're devoting to job search. If you're not working and you're spending 20 hours a week job searching or whatever it is, or even if you're working and you're doing this an hour a week, 50% of your job search time should be networking. That includes researching connections, trying to get introductions, reaching out thoughtfully, and setting up those calls and having informational calls and following up, right? Depending on how much time you have, if you can have a few of these, again, these are informational meetings, right? You still want to learn from the person. And then, yes, is there an ask of eventually, is there opportunities, right? So by way of the call, you're introducing yourself, but you're also asking a lot of questions. All those questions, by way of what you ask, you're going to prove your knowledge. So it's imagine just a great call with someone who's in your industry, right? You're just sort of riffing with each other. You're sharing notes. I mean, this is an area you likely are familiar with if you're searching for those jobs, or if you're not familiar, that's okay too. You're learning. Either way, you're 95% of the call learning. And then you see, oh, maybe guess what? Maybe there's an open role that's not posted, or maybe there's someone they want to introduce you to or refer you to. I saw another statistic. I have to dig it up, but it was something about how not only is it landed from networking, but it's usually a indirect or loose connection, an acquaintance, a friend of a friend, one of those kinds of things. So leverage your network's network, right? It's not just who you know, but usually it's kind of the random. I had a chiropractor who introduced me to a client once, and I ended up interviewing at, can't remember if it was BlackRock or Blackstone, one of those. So you never know where it comes from. And sometimes those are where the job is. So you got to be open and scrappy and resourceful and sort of a little willing to ask for help and willing to get out there. And I know that can feel weird and uncomfortable, but there's a way of when you focus it on learning, it helps it feel like we're both going to gain value from this no matter what else happens. And then nice cherry on top, can we uncover some other, maybe openings and yada, 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 right?
Yeah, I love that. And I love the story there about the chiropractor, because it makes me think about, especially when we're open and we're honest with people and we talk about what we do and what we're looking for. And someone said to me recently, live in, like, share about what you're excited about, share about your dreams and your aspirations and what you're working on in this transition, as opposed to the problems, right? Because when we focus on the problems, people will try to, like, well, maybe they'll just give us some answers, but it's not actually what we're looking for. But when we're sharing about, like, oh, I'm transitioning into UX design, they're like, oh, that's really cool. Have you talked to this person yet? No, I haven't, and then suddenly we're off and running.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like if you're at an informal gathering or like personal with family, friends, whatever it is, like instead of feeling pressure to have it all figured out, you just, again, it's meeting you where you're at. So you say, I'm looking into A, B, and C. And then exactly like you said, they're going to tell you who they know. People care a lot less, like in the sense of like, don't worry so much about like sounding like you have it all figured out. Rather, say what you have figured out, but say what you have not figured out and see how they can add and help. And they're not even going to worry about it later. So don't get so pent up about like, I only feel comfortable talking about it once I have the job, right? Or if I have the job. How about you tell them maybe you're exploring 3 different paths and maybe they know people in all 3 of those or whatever it may be. So getting comfortable to share exactly like you said, where am I at? What am I looking into? What am I not sure about? And see how they can help given what you actually need, basically, right?
Yeah. And if they know you, they probably want to help you. And if they don't know you, they might want to help you too. People like being helpful.
They do. They do. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yes.
So we're getting so many great comments in the chat. And questions. We have about 15 minutes left, friends. So keep them coming. Mary said earlier, a lot of this process involves reinforcing and nurturing your self-worth and confidence among moments of fear and changes. Do you have any advice for people who are doubting the process you set out for us to follow?
Let's see. Well, I think it depends on what exactly. Can you repeat it? I want to hear if I want to
Yeah,
hear
it's
if
a
I'm
really,
like
it's a really
exact down.
well-crafted, beautiful question. So a lot of this process involves reinforcing and nurturing our self-worth and confidence among moments of fear and changes. Do you have any advice for people who are doubting the process you set out for us to follow?
So this is the thing, like there's your self-worth, there's your capabilities, there's your potential, there's your confidence, there's your skills, and there's like that impostery feeling. But then there's the process. The process, if you can follow the practical steps, right? So there's a combination of I need to learn about myself objectively, and I need to learn about the world. That's what exploration is. You're doing those 2 things at the same time. You need to, the other thing I would say is if you're doubting yourself, find support. So there is the process, but don't go it alone. If you have a peer, a mentor, or a coach, that is another foolproof way to make sure, like what I listen for with clients is like, are you coming from the right place? Are you making decisions based on information, or is it a limiting belief, which is normal? But a coach's job is to unravel those things so that you're not making decisions based on, something that wouldn't serve you, right? And so having a support system is one way to make sure that you are benefiting from the process or feeling comfortable to navigate it. It's normal to have hiccups. I'll just say that. I did lay out that process, but really I should draw some ups and downs. And it's absolutely normal that it's not like this perfect journey. It's going to be a deep emotional thing because you're figuring out where you belong in this professional world. That's a big thing. So have someone with you, have support. Know that there's going to be ups and downs, but know that, really my life's mission is I've done this so many times with different individuals that I'm here to remind people that it is feasible and encouraged and beneficial and possible to actually get to the point of clarity. And so I know it's hard to like just trust and believe. I can tell you stories, you can look at the website, you can look at testimonials, but I know it's hard because the majority of professionals around us are statistically disengaged at work. So it's hard to like believe is it possible for me to find a job that I'm a fit with? It is. Give or take 30% of employees, professionals in the world feel that way. So it's not an example you always see around you, but you kind of have to find some hope and faith and belief. Maybe you find some success stories. Maybe you find some support around you. Maybe you find a coach or someone who's done it successfully before, anyone willing to help, or peers going on a similar journey, moral support, camaraderie. I do a lot of group coaching. It's a good reminder to, look at this group today, 50 people, right? So it's like, reminding yourself you're totally not alone. And people have made 180 pivots. I had a speech language pathologist who became a UX designer. There's any number of things you can do. Does it take a little time and effort? Sure. But, with support, a coach's job as well is to make sure you are being realistic, right? You're not going to, when you find the support you need, it's not like we want to find what is practical, what is feasible, what can we make happen, what works for you, what do you need, what makes sense given your timeline, right? So when you find the support you need, you're going to be able to navigate all these very normal, these are big questions, important questions. It's not like, we're here for a reason today. This is big stuff, but it's absolutely feasible. You can find support and you can reach that end result, but try to not go it alone. Because I think the first key is having other people around you, because otherwise when we're in our own head, that's usually kind of the trap, I would say.
Yeah. It's, I've heard this old saying about when the stories are going on in their head, whether it's imposter syndrome or doubt or whatever it is, it's like, we can take that voice to tea, but not to lunch. So invite them in for tea and then, but not to lunch. Like you said earlier in your chat, like, their information, right? It's potentially information. Like, what am I worried about? Let me jot that down. Are these worries sound? What are causing these worries? And then we can get that information, right? That's taking it to tea, and then we send it off, and then we go do our research and find out what we really want.
I love that. Yeah. And I always say, like, turn a fear into learning, turn a hesitation into a question, and turn that question into an answer, turn it into information. There's ways of using those clues when you go to tea with that hesitation or whatever it is. That's a clue. It's a journey that you can go down in a positive, healthy way, saying, what am I feeling and what can I do about it to actually, use this as an opportunity to get better, get stronger, get readier, right? Like, it's cluing you into something you need help with, something you need to resolve, which is good. Self-awareness and understanding is 50% of everything. Then the rest is, what can I go do slowly but surely to work on that, right? So,
Yeah. Oh man, Rachel, I love turn a fear into a hesitation, turn a hesitation into a question, and turn a question into an answer. That's some Rachel Serwetz gold right there, ladies and gentlemen. And days. That's fantastic. Okay, we have a little less than 10 minutes left, friends. So keep it coming. This is a very lively chat. I have to say thank you so much to all of you, and just like a testament to like sharing your truths and your vulnerability, and y'all are like helping each other out in the chat right now and offering up advice. This is really, really wonderful. This is such an excellent talk. To maybe one last thing on networking, some folks mentioned there's been a few people chatting about how they network, they link up on LinkedIn, and then that person like says like, oh, I'm so excited to talk to you in person. And then they're like radio silent on LinkedIn. And several folks have found it kind of discouraging when they try to network and then they don't see the results. And then other folks, on light of that, were like, well, I started in small groups and then I worked into bigger groups. And so there was some nice feedback that came back in there. Anything you want to talk about that journey of trial and error?
Yes. So with networking, there's a few things that I like to think about with responses. If you're not getting responses, what platform are you using? I think email over LinkedIn Messenger is usually the way to go if you can find that person's email or get introductions to people via email. Look, do people want more emails? Probably not, but LinkedIn gets saturated with messages, especially if it's a cold connection. So I think email is a little bit more of a clear way that you can actually write a little bit more of a true message, a thoughtful note. And it's really just more of that place that people are used to, first of all, they open up email. LinkedIn, sometimes people don't even like log in and things like that, right? So email is number one, the platform. Number two is how warm is the connection? If you're messaging somebody that's like cold, you don't know them, you have nothing in common, they're going to have less reason and likelihood to respond. I know that's not what we want to hear, and we want everyone to be so nice, but when you get an introduction, or say they're alumni of your university, or you have any something like psychologically, it just makes them want to help you, want to answer, want to go out of their way. Maybe you got an introduction from someone else. Things like that helps to make sure you get the responses and the help you need. And then the phrasing is the third thing. So what are you actually asking for? Make sure you're asking to learn. Make sure you're asking for clearly, 20 minutes. I'd love an informational chat. When are you free? But more than that, are you, I think one of my, not a pet peeve, but I would say a common pitfall that I see is people say, I'd love to pick your brain. I'd love to learn about your path. Can you be specific? Can you be creative? Maybe 3 or 4 or 5 topics. You don't have to list full-blown questions, but can you explain, like, I'd love to ask you about A, B, C, and D, and like briefly allude to some things that show that you're prepared to use their time wisely. And it's kind of like cluing them in. So like, I have questions prepared. I'm going to go into this call. It's going to make sense. I'm going to make it easy for you to help me. I like half know what I'm talking about. And I at least know what I'm asking you. I don't know all the answers, but at least I have some topics in mind. And that makes it so much easier for someone to be like, okay, this person isn't just blasting out networking requests. They're just like actually need to talk to me about these specific things that make sense given my background, right? Do a little research. I got a networking request. It was like years ago, but I could tell that the person like was literally just talking about me specifically in my background versus I send this request to everyone type of thing, right? That goes a long way. Even you'd be surprised with 10, 15 minutes of looking at someone's LinkedIn profile, you can really customize such a thoughtful message. So those are really the 3 factors I think about if you're not getting networking responses.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's so helpful. So we have just a couple minutes left. A couple people have asked in different ways. Someone asked specifically, how can we convince an internal group to let us shadow them? And I would say, how can we, enroll people in giving us opportunities, whether, that's shadowing or upskilling by working. Any tips on that?
Yeah. Well, shadowing is a tiny bit difficult, obviously, right? If something's sort of like confidential. That being said, if you know somebody in your network or your network's network, and maybe they can get approval, if it's a smaller company, can they send you an NDA? If you're purely learning, and maybe, go a little above and beyond. And like, why don't you find an NDA, like find a template, like tell them like, I will keep this confidential. Maybe you're not currently working at an organization, in which case there's no real conflict of interest. You could explain that you're learning from a career path perspective and what you're hoping to learn about. And maybe what specifically are you suggesting with shadowing? Is it 2 hours? Is it 3 hours? Is it a week? Or if you're really looking to shadow more fully, can you offer to be an intern, to be an apprentice, to be a fellow, to be a whatever? Or to do some pro bono, or, I think getting specific with the, not like the boundaries, but the perimeters of like, if you're trying to get a project, is it like, I would love to give you 5 hours a week for 6 weeks. Is there any projects you need help with on the team that you haven't been able to get to that you could use me and I could research for you or something like that? Like help them, get confined with like, how could this make sense? Like help do a little brainstorming. When this is something new you're proposing, you could ask, like, have you ever brought in interns? Would you be open to a 2 to 3 month pro bono project? What's on your plate right now? What's in your backlog? Like ask questions, get specific, try to give some ideas, but also networking. Again, if you know someone who knows somebody, these things are a lot more feasible when someone can kind of feel for you a little bit and whatnot and build a relationship. So joining like, mentor groups that is part of the industry you're even trying to be in, those people are going to care and they're going to see you're committed. If you can join groups, communities, industry associations, things like that, you may find more serious opportunities for somebody to take you under their wing and mentor you and things like that as well.
Awesome. Well, Rachel, we're out of time. This was absolutely fantastic. What a powerhouse of information you are. Thank you for being so generous and open with your knowledge to the community engaged with us today. Thank you so much for all of your questions. Rachel, be sure to check out Rachel's website, iamwoken.com, to keep the conversation going with Rachel. Any last thoughts or anything you'd like to share with us before we click off here?
No, I think this was awesome. And yeah, just stay in touch. I'm usually here with Power to Fly once a month or whenever we have our chat and learns. We're always trying to give you guys, interesting talks that are specific and unique and different. So stay tuned. And, my website, I have a ton of free stuff. Always get in touch if there's something you want to hear more about. And hopefully I can help you in the future.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Rachel. And I saw someone ask, yes, there will be a copy of this link. This will be sent out to you in a couple of days, and you can also find it on our YouTube channel. So rewatch it. There was a lot in here. Share it with your friends. Share the knowledge, right? We do this together. Rachel, thank you again so much. And I look forward to the next one.
All righty. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Bye now.